So let's start by just saying that, I'm not going to go on and criticise Ricky Gervais or, do a critique of, of his recent work, particularly, and make that into a big thing. Why should I? I mean, good luck to the guy. He's a man who has made an extremely good living. I think he's worth over 200 million now, according to some reports. From, I think, basically from the legacy of The Office. And I think, personally, I think everything he's done since The Office has come with a sort of diminishing returns. And I want to look into why people continue to dilute their legacy in such a way. Especially when we know they don't really have to. They don't need the money. They don't need the accolades. They don't need the awards. They do it for reasons that we'll have to investigate and think about. But I think with Ricky Gervais, the diminishing returns are such that I thought I'd talk about, what's the psychology behind this? Now, this isn't about Ricky Gervais entirely. It's about a psychological phenomenon. So, I mean, if you're somebody who thinks Ricky Gervais is absolutely fantastic and you've been laughing your head off at the last 4 or 5 Netflix stand-ups he's done, which he's collecting up to 40 million, I think, for those. And if you think they're funny and if you think he's brilliant, then this isn't really for you. Equally, if you really, really don't like Ricky Gervais and think that he's a talentless fat bloke or something, then this isn't for you either. We've got to look at, I think I'm going to, I like to try and deal with what I see as reality, my reality. My reality is that what he's done over the last 10 years, 15 years actually, 20 years even, certainly the last 10 years, has been just completely without any value. And I'm not speaking in isolation. I mean, I'm kind of representing the general opinion or critique of Richard Gervais as the artist and his work. That it started off great and has shown sort of devalued year by year. I mean, of course, he earns more money each year, but it's really hard to argue that his Netflix stand-ups and also his series Afterlife isn't just, Afterlife, just sort of sentimental sixth form garbage, the lowest common denominator in terms of drama. And his recent stand-ups, particularly the one that's just playing on Netflix now called Mortality, but also the one before that, is kind of, well, not only is it unfunny and tired and sort of out of date. Yeah, I know he makes $2 million a gig, and fine, but he doesn't need that money. And he's not the only one who is in a position of incredible privilege, really. Incredible power, huge amounts of cash, who, instead of adding value to the world, seems to me to be taking it away. I mean, Gervais has become the kind of anti-woke hero. And you'll find that in his last couple of stand-ups, the audience, they're not laughing at anything that's clever or funny or witty or brilliantly, great observation, in my opinion. And as I said, I'm not alone in this, but they're clapping because they agree with him. They agree with him. They don't really like the fact that it's not possible to kind of call out trans people. or misogyny. Goes on about disabled people, fat people. Interesting about, he did his last stand-up, but this one, I mean, he must have riffed for 30 minutes about fat people. And he was basically saying, he talks about things that none of the rest of us really care about. So he was saying that fat people, they're just greedy pigs and it's not a disease. Well, funnily enough, actually, the Italian government a couple of weeks ago actually has classed obesity as a disease because it has lots of kind of complicated and complex psychological reasons, and also it causes actually a lot of very expensive disease for National Health Services to have to handle. So it's best to deal with it as some form of illness, and then, you know, you save money in the long run. But anyway, that isn't the point. So the point is, he goes on about disabled people and trans people and misogyny and paedophiles and, you know, Hitler, and the Holocaust. He takes these because he kind of says that he's saying the unsayable. But as Stuart Lee famously said, of course, he's not saying the unsayable because he's saying it. And there's this idea that he is now thriving and his career is based on the fact that I'm saying things that they don't want you to say. And of course, the irony being that he is probably the biggest comic on the planet, and everybody's hearing him say these things that are so-called unsayable. But it seems to me to be completely unfunny and boring and old hat and, but who cares? I mean, he's making huge amounts of money. If he wants to do it, he wants to do it. And if people are enjoying it, they are. But as I said, they tend to be just clapping because they kind of agree with him, which is a kind of strange new phenomena which comes out of this kind of split world that we live in, that now we can find some sort of iconic, heroic figure that will stand up and kind of like the Farages of this world that will kind of stand up and kind of tell a section of the population what they want to hear. They will become heroes. And I think that that's kind of what's happened with Ricky Gervais. Now, that would be one thing, okay. I could just be saying, well, you're out of touch. He is absolutely hilarious. Well, fair enough. If you think he's hilarious, that's okay. I'm not arguing with that. I don't. But again, his show like Afterlife, which he was paid tens of millions for Netflix, to me is, as I said, it's kind of the lowest of the low in terms of kind of sentimental drama plodding along. And if you look back at his work, generally it's sort of, with every show, it's kind of deteriorated. And remember, he didn't really start with The Office, which was this sort of groundbreaking TV, which has given him the license to kind of do what he wants ever since. Which is quite unusual, actually, isn't it, in a way, if you think about it? Because, what was so great about The Office, it's difficult to. It wasn't the first sitcom to use that documentary style. There were many others before that. David Brent is a great character, but there've been other great characters. I guess it was one of those perfect storms. Stephen Merchant was probably quite important, that balance between Merchant, who was a very funny guy even back then, and Ricky Gervais, an incredible cast and a funny character. But I think most importantly about The Office is that there was, and of course The Office showed a little bit of sentimentality as well, didn't it? Had a little bit in there, he was already a bit of a romantic old fool, wasn't he? But I think The Office was great because I think it was subversive in many ways. It subverted our, not just life in the office, but life generally. So good luck to him. But in fact, before that, he was, for many years, and you can find them on YouTube, he worked with Carl Pilkington and Steve Merchant on XFM, and there must be 100 shows of that available on YouTube, where basically they played their favourite records of David Bowie and so forth, and they bantered in between, and it was great entertainment, really clever, very funny. There was something amusing about it. I mean, Ricky Gervais was a little bit cruel, but that's his style. And before that even, or during that, he was in the 11 o'clock show, and he brought a bit of a sparkle to the 11 o'clock show before he was famous. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Ricky Gervais's career, Ricky Gervais's career in its entirety. But I think we can assume that the spark has, I think the spark has completely gone and went some time ago, you know. So what I'm interested in is, why do people choose to water down their legacy to the point where they're producing very, very poor work? Ricky Gervais was on The Culture Show last week, actually. That's a Radio 4 show. And the interviewer was he trod carefully, but he did try and ask Gervais a little bit about how his latest shows have sort of been critically have been really panned. And Gervais answered it, but it was kind of pussyfooting around. The point being, of course, that what I'm saying is that I think there are many people out there who just wonder what the hell he's doing, really. You've got 200 million in the bank. Why are you doing it? What makes somebody who's got so much money swashing around, why do they not be the best they can be? Why would he just stand on the stage and sort of talk about fat people and as if we haven't considered these things for the last 50 years? Why would he play to increasingly sort of right-wing, anti-woke crowd who clap him, okay, because he's talking about how ridiculous it is that trans people should have their own toilet or something? Why would you do that? What happens to a man? A man who's got so much ability, so much power, so much money, a man who can do anything he wants. Does he think that he's doing something kind of important in the world? I think he's not. I think he is. I think he's adding to the problems that we're having at the moment. I don't think he's solving them. You see, he says that he's laughing at people who laugh at people who are in wheelchairs, but generally people don't think about people who are in wheelchairs. We have really good, much better laws which stop any kind of obvious physical prejudice against people with wheelchairs, and or chair users, as they like to be called. Not disabled people, but chair users. I don't know whether people do. I don't think people have the kind of attitudes generally that he thinks we all do, and which he seems to, he thinks he's got to put a pin in this ageist or misogynist or ableist balloon. I don't think he's doing any favours to anybody, and it's not funny. He's just not funny. Now, I know if you think he is really funny, then it's fine, but I don't, and I'm not alone. Now, if you ask Gervais, why are you still doing it? He will have his own psychological reasons for carrying on, even though what he does now has very little value. It's not bringing any added value into this world. He will say because he enjoys it, and that's great. That's a good enough excuse. He enjoys it. He likes the adulation. He likes to walk on stage. He likes to show off about how much money he's got. Now, of course, everything he says is said with irony, but if you believe that, you'll believe anything. And I'm just interested in why he's sort of given up on making good stuff. I'm interested to know what you think. Why bother, Ricky? Yes, be in the world, but move on. Move on from being the anti-woke hero. This sort of diminishing of one's own legacy, of course, doesn't end and begin and end with Ricky Gervais. It happens with a lot of people. Now, you'll probably know about, let's say, for example, the nostalgia circuit, which is really huge at the moment, which is, 70-year-old people like Dollar singing their old, being wheeled onto the stage and singing their old songs from 50 years ago, still dressed up in sparkly gear, caked in makeup, trying to make them look at least under 60, and doing it in sort of like really strange, like pantomime venues across the UK, anywhere from sort of, Margate to Swansea, plying their trade. Nothing wrong with it, of course, but we know why they do that. Yeah, we don't really even have to spell it out, do we? Well, they do it, they do it for money. I don't think you get paid a huge amount to do that, but if you can sort of tuck 60, 70 grand in your back pocket, that's pretty good. They need the money, and that's great, that's fantastic. Ricky Gervais doesn't need the money, okay? So you'd have thought that if he was going to go to eat, by his own admission, he's really lazy. So he's going to travel the world and kind of do 300 gigs at 2 million a pop. You'd think that he would bring something a bit more to the table than this old spiel he's got as the anti-woke warrior. Now you know my feelings about woke anyway, and that whole thing, and that is that in a way it's a kind of invention of the new right. Nobody else really cares about it, and we're quite happy to kind of respect different types of people, kind of the normal progressive ideas, and they've made it into a kind of culture war. But it's an invention, and it's an incredibly successful tool for for trying to get power and to sow the seeds of hate, generally. But as I said, Ricky Gervais isn't the only one, is he? I mean, another good example would be a band like Coldplay. Now, can I just give you a full disclosure here? I mean, I don't consider Coldplay to actually be music as such. I'm not denying that over their back catalogue there hasn't been one or two good tunes. But generally, I wouldn't consider them music as such. I think that what's left with them is nothing to do with the actual art. It's to do with the event and the happening. There is a Coldplay happening in your arenas around the world, and people go, and they've got their little laser candle they're given when they walk in, or whatever it is, or a wristband that lights up. It used to be lighters, but you can't do that anymore. Or phones they used to hold up. And it's a happening, and it's kind of it's a sing along, and it's like a sort of, I don't know, it's like a sort of Christmas special that you might have found on BBC or something, or it's a wonderful, affable, happy event. It's nothing to do with music. I can't think of any other recording artist which has had so much potential, so much money, so much possibility to go out and, make something that's of value, and has failed so completely as Coldplay. They are a band who have a selection of minor melodies which you can always guess the next note. They are contrived, they are cliched. It's music it's AI music before AI music has come to the fore and been born. Now, that doesn't matter because there's a lot of music that I don't particularly like, and that, there's, things that are popular are not necessarily going to be to everybody's taste. There's something about popular music which is very safe and very easy on the ear, not challenging, cliched and stereotypical, and kind of feels like it's AI generated even though it isn't. And that Coldplay are probably the greatest example of this. But what annoys me, and this is why it's the same parallel as with Ricky Gervais, is that Coldplay have all of the talent and resources to do something that is good and is challenging and is interesting and is an expression of the deep inner psychological soul of man. Because they're just men like you and I, or if you're a woman, probably not because it's on YouTube. They have this potential. With every album they have they have made, they've had the possibility and the money and the time and the equipment to go in and produce something challenging and interesting, subversive. And each time they come out with this awful, soporific garbage. Why? Chris Martin, very like Ricky Gervais, has got a couple of 100 million in the bank. He's incredibly talented. I mean, he can play that. What can't he do? And the question is, what could he do? What value could he actually bring? Why are they, like Ricky Gervais, why are they now just a kind of a machine for generating income and happenings, just like Ricky Gervais is? You cannot say that Ricky Gervais is any longer a comedian. Now, if you watch his shows, if you've got Netflix and you watch one of his shows, now the earlier stand-ups were okay, but I'm talking about the last two particularly. This one, Mortality, was just appalling. Yeah, you can't call him a comedian, and you can't call Coldplay music, and yet they're brilliantly talented. What's it all about? Do you not want to make any impact anymore? Is it that you really just want to be a kind of gruel for your kind of fan base? Do you not want to take advantage of your power, of your money, of your contacts, of your networks, of the equipment that's available now? Possibilities, potential. I mean, we know that Ricky Gervais is a clever guy. We know that he's smart. And we also know that he's like us. He comes from our kind of background, just a normal, lower middle class kind of guy from Reading. He must have things to say about the world. Yes, I know he spent the last 20 years living in 5-star hotels and a mansion in Hampstead. He won't stop talking about it, and he flies everywhere in a helicopter. He can't stop talking about it, and but that's fair enough. But he is kind of one of us, and you'd think that he'd want to produce something better than a kind of sentimental soap opera like Afterlife, which is just full of cliches, or a stand-up which is just going on for the last 3 or 4 about trans people and fat people and Hitler and paedophiles. It's not outrageous anymore. We're not outraged. You're not saying the unsayable, Ricky. You're saying the sayable, and that's why you're saying it. And it's boring, and it's tired, and it's not adding any value. We live in a world now where we're really up against it. We know that there are sadistic, greedy people who are manipulating and sculpting our future. And Ricky, who is a very talented guy, we need you to be raise your game a little bit, I think, or retire. You've done some work enough to justify your existence, Ricky, and not just The Office, but his work when he was on XFM, he was kind of funny. And then The Office and Extras was all right, wasn't it? I mean, his films were terrible. You know, his high concept movies about, you know, like he could see dead people, and then there was the one about he couldn't lie. But raise your game or get out of it. We need you. And it's this, Chris Martin, just get out of it. Just stop, please. All right, I just wanted to say that, and I don't have any answers as to why people continue. I would understand if they needed the money, and I would understand if they wanted to add value to the world, and I would understand if they wanted to, you know, to entertain us, to enrich us in some way, you know, in an entertaining way. But none of them are doing any of it. So why are they bothering? I don't really know. I'll just put that out there if you've got any ideas. And by the way, there's no point in saying I love Coldplay, you're an idiot. I love Ricky Gervais. I love Ricky Gervais, but I think he is, and I think that band are, I'm not going to mention them again. I think they're watering down with every time they do anything now. They're watering down their legacy to nothing. I don't think they really care, of course. And tell me what you think. I read comments. I don't always reply because I can't, unfortunately. And please, if you've listened to the end of this, please subscribe. And that makes it easier for me to continue doing this. So thanks, and see you next time.